see my guest a few months ago at Treeford Festival with a band, Butcher Brown, and was frankly completely inspired, not just with his facility and sort of timing and the way he phrased his notes, the way he sort of sang through his instrument, but just like the ability to riff off the cuff in poetry or rap sense, and to do it with such ease in front of a lot of people with a band of true fucking, excuse my language, badasses, really unbelievable musicians. And the thing that I left, pondering as I always do, is just the idea of, in this day and age, in June 2023, how do bands who are creating communal spiritual music, how can they sing for their supper? And this is stuff that I want to break down with today. Multi-instrumentalist and poet Marcus Tenney, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you for having me.
It's an honor,
It's
brother.
a pleasure, for sure.
Yeah. I just wanted you to
Absolutely.
I want to talk about your philosophy. Sometimes, people, bad things happen, negative things happen to people in their careers or just personally, and it kind of stops their forward momentum, their progression, their evolution. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about like how you learn to take a negative and turn it into a positive.
My skill in that area, I think, just comes from life experience. Like, I just had situations where I just didn't see a way out. And so I just kind of had to I felt like you either have to change your situation, the stuff around you, or you have to change yourself. And when I wasn't finding the answers I was looking for, I was like, well, I have to change myself. To me, which is in line with, improviser principles. You have to be able to be you on any type of song. So that's more of a metaphor for life in my eyes.
Could you, can you give an example early on in your life when, like you said, you either change your surroundings or you change yourself? Can you talk about a pivotal moment in your life when, for me, like it's always about moving forward, and you have to keep moving forward, and because if not, you get stuck. And some people, you know, just based on their upbringing, they learn to take that adversity and turn it into um, the ability to inspire. Is there a moment you can point to in your life that manifested?
Um, well, yes. I think the main moment for me, there were many, but I think the main moment for me was when, I decided that I wasn't going to continue to chase being a trumpet player alone.
Mm.
And, I started playing around with other instruments, just learning how to write because I really wanted to write music. And so, my brother was playing saxophone and he didn't want to do it anymore. So I ended up getting his saxophone. I was like, I'm going to learn how to play it. Because at that point, the only other person I heard that played those two instruments was Benny Carter and then Ira Sullivan. But I wasn't really thinking about it from that aspect of it. I was just kind of thinking about it
I
like,
dig. No, I dig.
well, I want to
Continue.
see,
Yeah.
I want to see what it's like to play this instrument. Like, you can't, you write for it. You can write for a person without having to be in their shoes, because that's the only way we can't be in their shoes. But to write for a saxophonist, you can be in their shoes. You can go sit in the front and hear what the trombones sound like behind your head. You can write for a drummer. You could sit at the drum kit and feel how isolated you can be sometimes. And I feel like knowing those things allows you to connect with musicians deeper. They know that you know what they're doing. And so that's kind of the driving force for what I wanted to do when I decided to not chase trumpet anymore. It was like, how do you connect with people? Because that seems to be the thing you're missing. Instead of practicing trumpet all day being alone, you got to learn how to connect with people to be in this industry.
Wow.
And so I
So,
think that
is
was
it fair to say that were you playing live with the trumpet? How far had you you said you were chasing. I mean, my favorite cats. I mean, Blue Mitchell, Woody Shaw, Freddie Hubbard. I mean, those cats. I get healed every time those cats are playing. And when they would play live, I mean, everything was, throw the charts away. You had no idea where they were going. As many bars as you wanted. It was always a great story. When you decided to pivot to the saxophone, did you already were you already on the bandstand with the trumpet?
I was, yeah. I had been playing around Virginia and going on tours all over the world on trumpet. Not really all over the world at that point, more all over the country. Um, but there was, my trumpet journey has always been musical based. I have always been interested in the music that these gentlemen were coming up with. And I was kind of removed from the process enough to not understand that, like, the reason why they sound like that is because they're on the road playing. And
Right.
there's a commercial stress on those skills. That's what gets them to the level that makes them noteworthy. And so, not to say that the art is not pure. It is pure, but skills in general have to be put under a level of stress in order to be actualized. Just like a precious stone. And so I think that that's what the thing about the jazz industry in general that I didn't understand at that time. And I was playing more with rock bands and I was playing with country bands and I was experimenting with singing and I was kind of gaining the skills to be a producer back then, but I didn't really understand how all that worked yet. So my mind was always kind of twisted up from the beginning.
That's all right, dude. I mean, come on, man. I'm just, I'm always I just consider myself a blind monk stumbling into grace, but the
Yep.
thing, man, like, this is so beautiful. I mean, can you, even if you're sticking with the trumpet, even though, yeah, you had this huge platter of, you know, music that you were playing rock, you weren't playing bebop per se, but, like, can you talk about, go a little bit deeper in your own personal life about this application of stress that really allows for, I can't do the poetry that you just said, but it allows for liberation on the instrument. Without that, you're just kind of either in your own bubble or maybe just wanking it. And can you talk about a stress level? Not a bad stress. I mean, I keep listening to this album or this one track on Joe Henderson live from the Lighthouse. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Right.
And it's like, I mean, dude, the I it's I mean, Woody's Shaw's solo is incredible. Joe is just out of his mind, and it's just, what it is. It comes down to, so many of the older cats. The thing I love about those guys, even though I'm just 45 years old. I mean, when you listen to some of the masters of the music, trumpet, sax, whatever. I mean, that language of bebop was so ingrained in them that they could just riff off the cuff. And
Yeah.
when I saw you play, I mean, again, we're pushing it into modern times now, but I mean, that's the first time I have, in a whatever live setting in a long time, that I have felt that kind of energy, where it was like urgency. You want to call it stress, whatever it is. I just want you to talk a little bit, riff on that idea of the application of tension in order to grow.
I think it's the same thing, with children. I think they need a box to operate in with set parameters that are on the lower side of quantity in order to flourish.
Mm,
Because
mm.
too much rope you can hang yourself with. That's a real thing. And I think, if everyone thinks, I think about my skills in relation to playing my C major scale on the trumpet. That's the first thing I learned how to play. Some trumpet players started on G, others started on C, and I started on C major scale, first scale I ever learned. So the way that I got around practicing trumpet was I was like, make everything sound as good and feel as easy as C major. And so when you just have that principle running in a continuous, compounding fashion, you'll be surprised what you create. That's basically all
Hmm.
I've been doing this whole time since I was 11, is like taking that same principle and moving around my whole life and seeing what happens. Um, and I think that that has been something that I've conveyed to so many different students. I have really tried, and so I think this idea of you know, the idea the idea that things need to be put under stress in order to be uh, solidified into something of value, I think is how the whole world operates. You think about somebody like the stories about Kobe Bryant that floats around, about how he was very vicious on the basketball court in terms of like, we're practicing today. There's stories about him playing in the rain when he's an NBA player, which is kind of, I guess is kind of a no-no, which is seems kind of obvious to me, but I'm not 100% sure.
No, yeah, I dig,
But you know
man.
what I
I dig.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Someone who has all he had, but still had the drive to continue to push. That to me is the same spirit that Freddie Hubbard had, the same spirit that Elvin Jones had, the same spirit that Coltrane embodies, trying to get rid of his isms. And I'm like, that's all of the baddest people in the world operate this way, to me,
I dig. Matt, you're it. I
on
continue.
some level.
Yeah, go, yeah. I mean, the other thing was like, I just, my most recent publication, my book, Cats Volume 4, I did, I'm not sure if you're hip to the sax player Don Menza, legendary horn player, studio
Yeah,
cat.
yeah.
Yeah. And he was talking about seeing Red Holloway and Sonny Rollins at like some Chinese restaurant in LA back in the late 80s or something. And maybe it was a Chinese restaurant, but they were blowing and I forget what tune they played, but Sonny just went off. I mean, and Red had to follow him, and after like the Don was just in the audience, but then like after the gig, like Red came up to Sonny, he's like, Sonny, why'd you do that, man? You made me look so bad. And Sonny's like, on the bandstand, he's like, off the bandstand, we're friends. On the bandstand, no. It's just like
Yeah.
truly like, hey, bring it. Like it's not nothing personal, but when we're on the court, you're in the rain. I mean, it's like this idea of continuing. This is really the issue is, and what you did when you transitioned to the saxophone, even though you had some very good musical aptitude, obviously a musical family, you had to play beyond what you knew. I mean, you couldn't.
Right.
I would love you to talk about like some of the early gigs. You don't strike me as somebody who would be shy, even if you didn't have necessarily everything under your fingers. Can you talk about some of those early gigs? I just think it's important for cats to hear from people that have evolved, continue to evolve, and they're established within the music biz. Like, can you talk about just sort of some of these early sessions when you showed up with the saxophone and sort of maybe situations where you did stumble and fall, but you got your due to the stress or that sort of impact, and then you got back up, dusted yourself off, and you kept growing.
Right. Yeah. Those first few sessions that I did and like shows, I was fortunate enough to come up playing saxophone around Richmond. And so like there's a lot of opportunity here to try things with musicians musicians in parts of a show that will generally cost a lot of money. A lot of our friends will have high levels of skill and they go out of town to make money. And then when they come home, they're just trying to hang out. And so they'll come do stuff for free down at the club. You're getting a $2,000 a day sound man for $175 in a picture of PBR. And I'm like,
Dude,
that
I
allows
love
you to
Richmond. I got to
try a
get to
lot of
Richmond,
stuff.
man. Yeah, go ahead.
And now it's not as family oriented as much, but it's still very community oriented and it's very industry minded now with all of these new forces coming in. But that, just being able to play with certain people in the city and being able to play with a large amount of people playing saxophone, those first few sessions, they were putting me in situations in studios that were nice, engineers that knew what they were doing, recording on great microphones, learning about engineering, production. And those first few sessions were creative sessions too. So there was really no wrong answer coming from me. So they would just say, hey, take the saxophone in there and just do some stuff. And I'm like, okay. And I'm just going to play what I know or play what I feel like I can do. And since the tape is rolling, that's kind of the more objective representation of the stress. It's like the tape's rolling, these guys
Sure.
are staring at you. You have to do something cool. And thankfully they liked it. I think that's when the universe took over. Is once I started playing, once I closed my eyes and started pushing buttons, it was like, oh, here we go. And so, I think just coming at it from that genuine standpoint every time, I think is the key. Like to any type of evolution is just like, or any type of anything. I think if you just give it what you got, then you'll be good.
I mean, that is spoken like I mean, you're making it sound that is not easy. I mean, that to me is um wow. I mean, when you say so let's just talk a little bit. When you talk about the universe taking over, did you just have to surrender to that to be able to sit in the mess? So you didn't have the rudiments, you hadn't shedded for years, you weren't part of, some sort of big R&B band. But when you say the universe took over, it meant that you stopped. Well, that you just stopped playing in fear. I don't even know if that's the right word, but what do you mean when the universe took over? What switched? What changed?
I think what I mean by that is like the forces that like whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen at that point. Once I'm standing on stage and I present myself as having prepared music that is valuable enough for all of these people to pay for, I think that that's the point where, okay, all of your prep, let's see what it adds up to. And once,
I dig
once you're
that.
standing on that stage, that's when it's getting added up. And if it wasn't enough, you're going to know it immediately. And there's no hiding. And so I'm like, that's why I'm always quick to practice. I'm always quick to talk music, think music, listen to music, because I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to touch my horn every day. But I think that if I soak myself in music some way, somehow that works for whatever situation I'm in, I'll be more likely to present something of value in that space. And so, like, when I say the universe took over, it's like when I get added up on stage in front of all those people, 17,000 people at the Hollywood Bowl, if I would have forgot the lyrics or I would have messed up a horn line like crazy to the point where it would have threw the band off, there's so many eyes that would have judged me.
That's right.
And that it's just right there. It's right there. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to make sure that I have it to a level that's valuable to the situation before I get there. And I think that's just to me, that's been the whole thing. I
You
just want that value.
I mean, it's talking to Marcus Tenney here on the Jake Feinberg show. I mean, you say this is really important because I've been kind of on a binge with interviewing some younger cats lately, and it's funny. I mean, we're kind of just from the same generation, but a lot of the millennial cats that like this, some of them are just not even just. You can tell they have a lot of soul. They're just like burning, and they are
Yeah.
incredible tacticians. And yet, the one thing that kind of breaks my heart is that what you talked about in Richmond at one time, that family atmosphere, which you said is now still strong communally, but less family oriented. Um, I asked to a man, I said, "Do you have an elder?" And these are guys that are not necessarily road dogging, but they're playing tons of gigs locally in Phoenix and stuff. Do you have any elders that you can rely on for not just musical wisdom, just life wisdom, guys that have been around longer? None, none. And it's like that family tree of music has really broken down. Part of it might have to do with some of these forces at work that are coming into play. I mean, I just, to me, Lenny White, who's actually coming to Tucson on Saturday with Buster Williams, and I cannot wait to just get my face melted off in the front row. He told me when he was with Art Blakey, or even just in general, when he was in San Francisco, Art Blakey would come in for 2 weeks, at the jazz workshop or whatever. And, you know, one cat, Jake Feinberg, would show up. have a great night. Then he'd bring back 2 or 3 friends the next night. By the time the 2 week engagement was over, there was a whole community there. That
Right.
I'm not trying to be Pollyannish, but what I'm trying to get at is your musical forefathers. Who were some of the elders that, or even today, some of the cats that you rely on just when you feel like you're kind of in a rut, or you need to hear the truth. Who are some of the elders that have had an impact on you to this day?
Um, Christian Scott was big impact on me personally. Just kind of more direct impact because he was kind of bringing attention to the fact that like, uh, you have a lot of music, but you need to expand it into a identity
Hmm.
because people can identify music everywhere, but they can't really pick you out of the bunch. And I'm like, looking at what he represents and what he stands for and what he presents to the world, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, Folks like Rashawn Ross, he to me that dude is dedication to the trumpet. Like it's like you want to come out here and you want to do this in front of all these people, you got to be able to manipulate this trumpet, and like you really got to be able to do it. Don't
Yeah,
give
right.
them something that's not real. And you hear him play all these notes for all these years, and I'm like, yeah, I remember walking down the street at VCU listening to Rashawn Ross playing trumpet solos. Nicholas Payton, you know, that
Yeah.
he is a example of you don't have to walk and you can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
You don't have to
for
just
the
be
for
a
the
trumpet
non
player.
music for the non musician, explain what that means.
That means that a lot of times you bring value in lots of different ways, and you have the capability to bring value in lots of different ways. But I think it's up to you to explore what those ways are, and see if they're ways that feel comfortable for you, that make you happy. Um, and I think that shines through in those types of musicians because they have gotten their skills to a level that is extremely high, but it's still a part of just who they are. It's like you're still whenever I see them perform, I still want to hang out with them more than I want to listen to them play. And I think that if the music makes you attracted to the person, that it's a that's the thing. Mike, that's Mike
You're
Tyson, that's
100% right, dude. You're nailing
Michael
it because, like,
Jordan.
yeah, no, I mean, because it's like, it, I just remember a story recently. I just was listening to one of my interviews. Cats would go see this guitar player, Jim Campolongo, in New York, and the guy was not John McLaughlin or Al Di Meola, but inevitably he would have these little things that he would pull off, these little runs, and inevitably all the cats that would go see him, they were all rooting for him. They all,
Mhm.
and more importantly, they would leave wanting to get better on their instrument. They didn't want to burn their instrument or throw it in the ocean or whatever. It was like it
Right.
was an inspiration to keep growing. That is a human life force. And to
Yeah.
me, like that is what it's about. That in music, that is always what it's about. And I just wonder how you with your students. I mean, again, you know, practical application on the bandstand is always going to be paramount. But how do you get them? And this sort of ties into what Christian Scott said that we can get into in a minute. But how do you try to wean them off of the riffology and the technique and get more into that idea of identity and feeling? That to me is, me and you could walk up and down the streets of Richmond, Virginia, and ask cats what their definition of jazz is. We get 20 different answers. To me,
Right.
it's spiritual, burning music with pulse and tension and release. End of story. Doesn't need to go any farther than that. Maybe that's coming out of the American songbook, maybe it's not. But inevitably, too many cats are caught up in because we just are deluged with so much information. Everyone's got a book out. They're transcribing Elvin Jones solos. It's like, how do you wean them off comping and getting more into the individual feeling of who they are?
I think I don't remember who I heard this from, but they were saying it was a musician that I found to be on a scary level, like someone who had a lot of facility, a lot of organized technique, but also understood the soul language and knew how to manipulate it in a technical way, but also knew how to take the technical things and make them emotional, be able to cross that line. But that person that was at some clinic somewhere, they were saying that when you practice, you need to start with the things that you love the most, because that's what's going to drive you to dive the deepest into the song. And then you dive in that deep, you come up with the systems to understand the song. And then you just take those very same systems to the next record. It's very, it's like, which record are you going to listen to 1,000 times over? You're going to listen to, some lo-fi
Yep.
thing from 1928,
Yep.
unless you're super into that, you're probably not going to run it 1,000 times. But like, how many times have we run The Sorcerer? How many times have we run Adam's Apple?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Ready for Freddie.
Ready
You
for
run those
Freddie,
records
man.
over. So I'm like, I would tell all my trumpet students, I'm like, okay, you have what's going on in the studio with your teacher. But I was doing like ensemble work, but I would tell them in private lessons off the record and whatnot, I would just kind of say, you need to have two lists running. You need to learn the songs that you're given in school by the professionals, because they are being your teachers. And you need to find what's magical about those, but take that back to the stuff you like. Like, don't feel like you have to cut your music off. Keep the even if it's like, if you're a Swiftie, if you're a Taylor Swift fan, you listen to those records, listen to the discography, know the song forms, know the lyrics, top line, learn the pieces, and you will gain valuable musical information that will propel you to wherever you're trying to go based off of what you like. Just the idea that I get paid to rap sometimes at places like the Hollywood Bowl with Butcher Brown in Europe, that to me is amazing, because that skill set primarily comes from hanging out in high school with my friends, and listening to rap music. And we would
Uh,
listen to it so much that we just had it memorized more than we had our math homework memorized, more than we had locker combinations
I
memorized.
dig, man. Yeah, man.
And now it's like, that's a skill that has been actualized and realized into value multiple times over many years in many different markets. And I'm like, any skill is worth it to me, because you never know where it's going to become valuable. It's like Zelda. You never know what you're going to need. Let's get that. Bring it.
Dude, I need to ask you, going to the high school level, it's so interesting because I mean, what was so cool about Butcher Brown was that, and again, I am not somebody who's, I'm going to be turning to, you know, CTI, Freddie Hubbard, and Woody Shaw any day of the week before I turn into doing, hardcore gangster rap or hip hop. But what
Right.
I recognize, what was so cool about Butcher Brown was that you were rapping and the rhythm was round. It wasn't quantized. It wasn't a drum machine. It was like a funk band, and it was so freaking hot. And I mean, I don't think there's much else going on like that. At least I haven't been hip to that kind of stuff. And it was just like you guys were bringing the fire in so many ways, and it wasn't. It was real humans, real heartbeats, real pulse. Going back, people would say, I've interviewed uh, so many of the guys that came up with traditional American folk music in the '60s, guys that were influenced by Reverend Gary Davis and you know uh, Mississippi John Hurt, essentially singing about life and times, the Bob Dylans,
Mhm.
the Yorma Kaukonens, the Jeff Moldauers, the et cetera, et cetera. Today, everyone says, even the folkies of that time, today's modern day folk music is rap music. And it took me a minute to really understand that, just being kind of a naive cat, but now I get it. And I just wanted to know what were the folk messages, the authentic street messages that was so intoxicating for you guys that you didn't even know your locker combinations.
uh, well, for me, it was, as any young kid, I was, I was, a target for certain entities that were not not good for children or society in general. But I think that that music gave me a little bit of a window into how those things were, and like just being kids on the street with not much direction coming from any place other than authority. Um, you start to develop these. You listen to the older guys who have the things that you want, and sometimes their principles are more militaristic. So, I think between the rap music and between and really seeing what's going on in the street and seeing how people actually operate when they think no one's looking, um, you kind of see what moves the needle and how it moves the needle, and what I need to adopt and what I need to stay far away from. That's
Dude,
the
you
best way
are
I can put it.
this is dude, you just that was a beautiful little. I mean, let hold on a second. The Can you talk about one of the old school cats? Or he may not be known, have any name recognition, but were there like the last poets, Abidin Oyewole? I've done a couple interviews with him. Those guys were like, I mean, it was like street corner stuff. But I mean, I can you
Right,
talk about it through amidst all that chaos, amidst lack of structure, outside of just authoritarian, you will do this or there will be consequences.
right.
Who was somebody that you were like, I got I got to add that to my essence? With some kind of like thing that you learned that's you wanted to add that to yourself.
Well, look to me, looking at people like Dame Dash and looking at people like 50 Cent, I think that those guys, to me, are great examples of people who have dialed their situations to what was happening around them and found a way to turn a negative into a positive. At least from what I see from my standpoint. And so some of those things, you obviously there's different levels of people that do levels of things, but I try not to frame things as good or bad. I try to look at them as in terms of force. Because
Wow,
as a
wow.
man,
That's like, you talk about. What do you mean by that?
like for as it relates to music, if I'm on the bandstand and someone doesn't know a song or someone messes up a melody, I'm not gonna look at them with some kind of you know malignant feeling, or like a way to try to shame them. I'm just gonna look and see if you're good. You know what I mean? Because I've
Uh,
seen people fall out, playing trumpet, and I'm just gonna look over to make sure you're good. All that air moving can kind of move your bloodstreams in strange ways, and you might fall and hit the floor. Maybe that's why he missed the note. I'm gonna look and see. But
that's right, man.
you know, there's a lot of just things that I think that I just don't. I want to convey positivity and bring value, because to me those are the moves that uplift the situation. And I think uplifting any given situation or having anything that pushes things up instead of down is exactly what everybody needs right now.
I couldn't agree with you more, brother. I mean, it's so beautiful to hear you to talk to you, man. Like going back to Christian Scott for a minute. When he sort of was like, "Hey, man, you got so much content, but how are you going to cut above the morass of everybody else that's doing this kind of, doing their thing? How are you going to make it unique?" Um, you know, was that an intellectual exercise for you, or was that something that you kind of? How did you get to the point where Marcus Tenney? I mean, you were just going back and forth between trumpet and sax and rap when I saw you. And the greatest thing, honestly, that was probably the most old school thing. It's like the OG thing was like if you didn't feel it, you weren't playing the note. You know what I'm saying? Like you
Right.
chose very carefully, like and not meticulously, but just I was sort of waiting for riffology and it never really came. And yet it was still so satisfying because I'm so used to you were one of the really cool cats that left a lot of space in the music and to see you guys in that sort of venue. But in terms of was that one of the things that how have you have tried to set yourself apart with your art?
I think clarity is the guiding principle for me. the
You mean
clarity,
within the playing of the clarity of the notes?
the clarity of the notes, the clarity of the rhythms, the music in general, the clarity of the concept. Um, you know, just being clear about what you're trying to convey, understanding what it is I'm trying to convey, understanding how, like, what it has to go through in order to be conveyed, and then what does it sound like when it's conveyed to you. And using those three things, I really try to zero in, especially when it comes to taking a solo these days, because I used to be of the fan club of taking 50, 60 choruses on one song.
I dig. I could feel
Um,
that you were like as many bars as you wanted, but I could have had that. I would have loved that too. But the fact is, there was so much breathing that the whole thing was like
right.
one. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, I mean it just trying to keep that one, just trying to keep it like an ocean, that
Totally.
any 1 gallon of water is not sticking out. But there's tons of them out here, even more than we can see. And so I'm like, well, that's this band, that's Butcher Brown. It's like this groove that we're playing right now is just off the cuff. It's like everyone is improvising this feel and sound right now. No one knew we were going to play this like this. We just knew the form of the song, and we all agreed that we're not going to change it. And so we change every and anything else though. So, like,
That's right. That you guys, how did you come to that philosophy? Was that just the organic thing? I think that's the magic of the music of Butcher Brown is that you never play the same song the same way once. That is the greatest, that you never, that to me is the essence of jazz as well, is that the form is there, but everything else is all different all the
right.
time. Was that the way Butcher Brown started, or has that sort of manifested over time? Where I mean, to me, it's already an obvious answer: is that trust breeds that ability for everybody collectively to be part of the conversation. But
Right.
how has the band grown in your mind as it relates to never playing the same song the same way once?
I think that attribute right there specifically, in my eyes, comes from Corey, because Corey was in a lot of jazz situations that were high end. Playing with Christian Scott, playing with Nicholas Payton. That right there, to me, is the cutting edge of music.
Absolutely, modern
And
day,
so, yeah.
definitely, yeah.
And so I'm like, being in those situations, you're playing with musicians who are like in record deals and have relationships with business relationships that have them make an album and then go present the album. So I feel like in that process, when you make a piece of music and then you go out on the road and you push that piece of music, you have the freedom now to deviate from what the song sounds like.
Mhm.
If you, like, for us, for example, Tidal Wave, we could play that song any way we want, because when you go look it up, you'll go hear the main version, you'll hear the version we did over here, the version we did over there. So I think previously a lot of musicians would go tour the record, go play an arrangement, and they were trying to get the arrangement nice and tight and then hit the studio. When you do that, you lock yourself into an arrangement, which to me has different benefits. Um, but I think these are musicians that were making the art and then going to present it through live shows, and I think that opens you up to a level of freedom that causes you to not play the song twice. So Corey would come to the rehearsals for Butcher Brown and he would just switch the groove up, and at first, it would make people uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Um, but then it's an interesting situation, because he's the only one that was seeing the level at what he was playing at. You know what I mean? For him to
Absolutely.
go to Yellowstone and then go sit down with Nicholas Payton to go, and I'm like, I don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
So I have no idea why you want to change the groove. But then over time, Corey was just like, no, we're just gonna do it like this. We know the songs, and then Devon would keep us musically together, like
Right.
coherent,
Right.
to the point where it's like this. If it doesn't make musical sense, DJ's gonna stop this. And then Andy keeps things in a presentation mentality. he kind of doesn't allow things to go to a place where it becomes musically gratuitous, which I think is one of the keys to Butcher Brown, because I think that's the thing that allows us to kind of peek over the jazz fence into some of the other genres, is having that level of discipline on both ends. We keep it musical, but we also keep it moving. It doesn't get too ethereal.
Dude, you're nailing this, dude. Wait, you said gratuitous? That's an
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah,
music can get to a place where it can be gratuitous
right.
to just the musicians on stage. And I think that's one thing that separates the masters from the masses. Like, Sonny Rollins, for example, I don't find a lot of examples of him being musically gratuitous. And that's, to me, is what makes him amazing, is that, dude, you're
Absolutely, man.
improvising that shit because I can feel it. And like that is like, that's brilliant. It's brilliant. Like, look it on paper, listening to, it's brilliant. Um, and the same thing with any great musician. I think when you get into a musically gratuitous space, you're alienating someone. And I'm like, why would you do that? That means that you have an all supreme belief that your music is going to hit someone. And I'm like, I don't know where that comes from, because no one knows what's going to hit anyone. That's the game.
It is the game, man. This is so classic. Yo, so do you think uh cats like I've always been talking to cats about this lately, where I remember interviewing Mark Egan, who was the bass player for a period of time with Pat Metheny, and so many of these cats, when there was like a vibrant, and again, let me be clear, Butcher Brown, man, doing a prolific fall tour or summer tour, going to Pickathon, a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of interesting festivals that are just like perfect spots for you at this point where we're at as a society. But when there was like a dynamic touring circuit, Pat Metheny would go out. They road tested new tunes like 180 gigs, and then basically those tunes took on a life of their own, and then they went and cut them in the studio. Do
Yeah.
you think like Nicholas and those and Christian, those cats, that they will, not necessarily that quantity, but they'll, to me, so many younger musicians that are trying to figure out the racket, and they have a band, they're constantly making record after record after record, and those records wind up sitting on the shelf and atrophying. And so it's like, what do you feel like those cats, Nicholas and Christian, like that they road tested those songs so that the songs could take on a life of their own, and they were like a living, breathing organism when they actually did go in and record them?
I think with those two in particular, from where I stand and what I see, I think that I think it seems like one of the guiding principles to the way that they're operating is that they keep the freedom to choose based on how they're feeling. You know what I mean? Or like whatever they want to do at the moment. And I think that's the smartest thing you can do as a performing musician, is to put yourself in a position of improvisation. And to me, improvisation, I've always said this, and I think this is one of the most profound things I've ever heard, is that improvisation is nothing but preparation meeting opportunity.
I love this.
And so I think that,
I freaking love
you know
it.
what I mean? It's like, if I'm meeting you for the first time, I don't know what you are, who you are, what you sound like. So my preparation can't be but so targeted. It has to be more sweeping and more efficient and more broad and more sustainable. And when I look at those guys, that's what I see. That's what I hear. That's what I aspire to be. Looking at those guys. Christian, to me, is like the modern day Miles Davis. Like, he's pushing lots of boundaries, doing lots of things, and you see that trumpet right next to him, and I'm like, man, that is insane. Nicholas Payton, you know what I mean? Like, just
Yeah, I
on a
dig.
straight
Oh
up
man.
base level, it's just like, that is insane. Nicholas Payton is just such a monster musician. Like, I just don't like, it's like, I don't know. It's like a supercomputer that's always running. Like,
And
he
it's
just
always,
he
and
just
it
like
doesn't, and it's never, it's like a computer can be sterile, but this is always feeling good. It's always
this.
burning.
Yeah, this is a computer that doesn't let you know it's a computer.
It's got
It has
it's got a
successfully
pulse. Yeah.
masked its computerness. But like,
Wow.
looking at the videos of him playing bass at the Blue Note, looking at just listening to the old albums, listening to Gumbo Nouveau, just like Peyton's Place, just all the transcriptions over the years I've done. And then looking at the musicians that he gets associated with, the ones that he's played with, the records he's put out, the awards. I'm like, man, this dude is nuts. And we see him at the festival. And he comes over, he's like, hey, what's up, y'all? I'm like, man, and he's cool. And like,
He's totally, I mean, dude,
he's
that's the
taking a
best.
stand
Yeah.
for the music that we all know and love. And I think that is these are things that the spoons of time who stir the pot do. You know, Leonardo da Vinci was not all well and loved when he was here. But then after, his legacy has kind of spread around, and it's like you start to see how deep some of his oceans in his mind went.
Yeah, I mean, dude,
It's
so
like,
many of the cats, man. Like, their genius was recognized long after they left the
long
planet.
after they were gone.
Yeah, and I mean, man, I just want to ask you personally, like, because I am not I just see so many of my friends, they're in single. I use it like baseball, single A, double A, triple A, majors, whatever you want to say that as far as where they're at professionally. But the guys that are really playing original music, um, and they're road dogging it, and basically they're trying to keep as many people out of their pockets as possible. They might have publicity people, things like that. But the point is that in this time, I was actually so inspired to see that you guys, looks like you guys are on the road for like 3 weeks or a month or something. It seems like a
Yeah.
long time. I mean, in this time, uh, at least for these cats that I follow, they don't make much money on the gig itself. They have to be out on the road for at least 3 weeks or more just to make a little bit of dough on the merch tables. And I just wonder how you guys have created a sustainable model. To me, you're even with COVID, which stunted so much momentum. You guys still, like you said, it's that non-gratuitous attitude. But beyond that, how have you created a sustainable model so that you are actually able to go out and tour for a month? I mean, Mike Gordon from Fish, he's only getting 9 days. I mean, unless you're Steve Miller, Tower of Power, or Dead and Company, but forget it. It's just it's absurd. But yet
Yeah.
you guys, go ahead.
Our guys, our team is awesome. We've been like, we've had some ups and downs with infrastructure. But we're in a place now where everybody is liking each other, everybody's talking to each other, and I think that to me is the best part about all of it. Is because when you see two people from a team on a project you're working on go hang out over here, it's like, oh yeah, who knows what that relationship's going to start.
That's right.
So I think a lot of those things have come together to the point where now we have like a tour, and we've also, previously we've relied on everyone's freelance abilities, meaning like, Butcher's only going to play in these spots, so feel free to get your scene somewhere else. But I think having that balance of what's Butcher and what's an individual thing, but also being supportive on both ends is the main key, because that allows us to have basically a sixth member that will basically provide lots of different things and lots of different situations. And it's all a thing that we all have put together through our music and through our travels and through our relationships. And I think that's the best part about it. It's just another connection apparatus.
You just went to Never Ever Land on me. A sixth person. You mean collective?
Oh,
That's yeah.
I think that's kind of how I think about it, just because it becomes
No, I love it. I mean, it's going to take me a while to get my head around that. But like, it's this like the tentacles are out there that make you more elastic. I'm trying to figure out how to put that. It opens you up to more opportunities than you may normally have if you would pigeonhole yourself.
Yeah, because it's a kind of the similar idea behind starting a corporation or starting an
Right.
LLC. It's like, you have a separate entity that can make moves in different ways at the same time, in concert, synchronization. And I think if we musically treat Butcher Brown that way, we can kind of create a sixth apparatus that, because Butcher Brown can get into rooms that individuals can't. But once Butcher Brown gets in there, then the individuals have an opportunity to interact with these people. And then, if a member of the band has a important show that they've gotten as a result, we can find a way to make sure Butcher Brown is the silent backing band.
Oh man, I dig, man. Thank you. There you go.
So,
That now it's
fun stuff
clear.
like that. And that's just surface level
Wow. I
stuff,
see.
but
I don't
like,
think I see that's man. I just got chills, man. I don't think that there's many bands around like that, man. I don't think so. I think that
and I
that
think that, that particular thing is how you protect the sound. That's how you
right.
make sure that such and such, you can do your own thing, sure. But if you need a band and you want it to be easy, let's all just go do it. And then that way we make sure it sounds good. And so we're propping each other up. We're still doing our freelance thing. We're still making money a lot of times, but this is the apparatus that we've used for these different things. Now, obviously we have lots of contracts and radius clauses, and we try to be very careful when we do stuff like that. But we definitely always try to use it as a value bringing tool as opposed to a thing that's handing out a check. We try to use it to really make, people happy with that.
You figure that everyone is kind of there's no necessarily titular figurehead leader of the band. You guys kind of self-police and bring different stuff to the table, and everybody kind of whether or not they want to hear it or not, they recognize that that's the strength of what that cat's bringing to the table.
Yeah, I think that everybody, that's one of the golden principles of Butcher Brown, is that everybody is willing to like be outvoted. Everyone
I did,
understands
yeah.
when they're outvoted, that's what happened. There's never any back and forth when we get to that area. And I think that everyone also understands that responsibility of accepting that L is what makes the band special, because we can
Absolutely.
do things past where we are comfortable. And as long as we can do that, I think we'll continue to grow as big as we want. Because I think that's the key, stepping outside the comfort zone. So I think that is that principle right there, but then also having the respect to really listen to each other and really take a second to consider what they're saying because of who it's coming from. And that has taken us a long way. It's taken a little while to get that calibrated to the level it is now, but I think any relationship takes time to calibrate, especially as one gets older. But I think that it has definitely made Butcher Brown the force that it is, and it's going to continue to drive the growth. Because as long as we have that, we'll be good to go.
Oh my God, dude. I am so pumped, right? I mean, the only thing that bothered, I told Brother Randazzo, I said, we got to get you guys down to Arizona, man. I mean, I was so bummed. I
Yes.
thought that trip was coming, man. It's up Oregon, dude. I'm telling you, just the fact that you're gonna go. You know what's so cool? Putting aside, just being on tour, having a ball. Some shows are good, not so good, or but still, it's kind
Right.
of you're floating through time. The fact that you're like going to essentially like a bluegrass jam festival, you're going to inspire so many freaking cats to push themselves. That stuff is unquantifiable. On my journey, 12 years in, 2,000 interviews, I've reconnected older cats just through those interviews. And,
Yeah.
it's like that unquantifiable inspiration. And I guess, wrap it up set one. We're going to have to do set two, man. I
Oh yeah.
had such a ball, but set to wrap this up, just you yourself. I mean, I have to believe, and maybe you do play gigs where you're just freestyle, like rapping the whole time. Maybe you don't. I mean, how have you learned? I mean, I remember when early on in my career, the cats that helped me find my voice were Richard Davis and Jack DeJohnette and Joe
Right.
Chambers and all these. I was reaching out to these guys who were playing this black classical music because I started my show because I was sort of like I was just a naive cat at thinking that we were living in this post-racial society after Obama got elected, and then all this insanity broke out, and I was like, well, maybe we really aren't that great, and I have to go back and talk to cats that lived through a different time of covert racism. So
Right.
but the point is that coming out of that, people are like, oh yeah, he's a jazz journalist. I'm like, I'm not going to get pigeonholed. So I had to go after Taj
Yeah.
Mahal, bluegrass cats, everything. So basically, it's all music to me. But with Marcus Tenney, how how have you learned to maneuver around the racket and be sort of a chameleon and not get pigeonholed?
Oh man, that to me, that's where the network comes in. That's where the conversations come in. The beers at the bar after the show. And also, you know, interacting with musicians as much as possible and listening to what's really coming out and what the vibes are and what the trends are, staying tapped in. In my mind, I think that the younger generation is what drives these, especially these culture driven, entertainment driven industries, because they're the ones that are driving the spending. So not to say that these are all tied to money, but I'm just saying
No,
that
you're not. In this day and age, they are.
they are.
They are.
I know a lot of people get upset when I say that, but
No, it's unfortunate. It's true. Yeah.
it just, and I'm like, they're the ones pushing the spending, pushing the growth. They're buying all the merch, and so you have to make things that are what they want if you want to be successful. And I think that if you put that parameter on yourself, I don't think that that means your skills have to diminish. I think it means that you just have to be more creative with what you're given. What type of lemonade you're gonna make out of this. That to me
Dude,
is where
I'm
the
loving that because
creativity comes
yeah,
in.
man. Because I'm such a guy who was like, I want Marcus to freaking, I don't do anything pop or commercial. Just go out. But the problem is nobody's going to be at the merch table after you know what I'm saying? Like, I get what you're saying, where you have to say, hey, how, even though I got maybe one hand tied behind my back or a little bit limited, like, you know, how could I, basically, how could I turn chicken salad into a gourmet dish?
Right. How do you
You know,
do it? And
how
I'm
do you?
like that.
That's the challenge.
I
It's
think that
beautiful.
when I think about every entity in the world, like hospital, bank, anything, cars, all that, these inventions and all this stuff, I'm like, that came from someone saying, how are you going to do that? Like somebody was like, this is how I'm going to do it. And it worked. And like, now we use it. And I'm
That's
like, oh,
right.
so it's only an answer away from that question to me. How am I going to do that? Like, oh, well, let's figure it out. Let's dive in and get our hands dirty and we'll see what we come up with. If we like it, we'll keep it. If we don't, we'll put it to the side and, maybe we'll run into the ingredients to spruce it up later. I don't know. But positivity, I think that brings the most ideas.
Marcus Teddy, man, I could hang for 9 hours, dude. This was such a great hang, man. I really am so humbled. The minute I saw you, man, I was gonna say, like,
Thank you for
I mean,
having me, man.
you're kind of like you're pretty sweet, lovable cat. I would say that, like, when I saw you, though, I'm like, in his own way, like all the great leaders, you would say that there's this element of fear. And you're not that you're the leader of Butcher Brown, but just like, whether it was Miles or, there was just sort of like, even with the professors or teachers, there's always this element of fear. And I looked at you and I'm like, he's an imposing character, but it was so cool to let this time go, interview Fonville, Randazzo, get to the other cats, but just to know how beautiful a cat you are, man. Like, you know, you got it. You guys got it going on, and you're totally resourceful. And they could give you, the worst tomato sauce and stale pasta, and you're gonna freaking turn it into something so dynamic and grooving. And I just think you guys are an important force in this time, man, because of the stuff we've been talking about. So maybe after the
Yeah.
tour, man, we'll do set two, brother.
Yes. Anytime.
Yeah,
Thanks for
man.
having me.
Yeah, man. Be cool.
Yes, sir. You as
All right.
well.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.